The Count's baby cried with every nanny, but he only smiled in the arms of the new maid. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The child had been crying since dawn. The sound climbed through the stone corridors, thin at first, then sharp, then hoarse. It bounced off high ceilings, slipped under doors, tangled itself in the clatter of pots from the kitchen and the murmurs of servants already weary of the new day. In the nursery, a young woman in a neat black dress walked back and forth until her legs trembled. She rocked the red-faced baby in her arms, whispering pleas he could not understand. "Hush, little Count. There now. Breathe. Look at me. Look at Signora Bianca." Matteo Bianchi did not care for her name or her careful tone. His tiny fists opened and closed in fury. Tears streaked his flushed cheeks. His cries tore the air insistently, as if the world had done him a great wrong. The door opened. A footman announced, "His Excellency, Count Lorenzo Bianchi." The nanny tried to compose her face as Lorenzo stepped inside. He had not slept well, anyone could see it. His black hair was perfectly combed, his dark coat without a crease. But there were faint shadows under his eyes, and his jaw was set in that tight, silent way the servants had come to fear. "How long?" he asked. "Since before dawn, Excellency," Signora Bianca replied, bouncing the child. "He nursed, but he will not settle. It is his temperament. Some children are simply—" Matteo wailed louder, as if offended by the description. Lorenzo walked closer. For a moment he only looked. There was something in his gaze that made the nanny shift her weight, suddenly unsure of her own hands. "Give him to me," he said. She hesitated, then obeyed. The baby turned in his arms, his face pressed against his father's waistcoat, tiny fingers clutching at the fabric. Lorenzo held him firmly, in a way that suggested practice rather than ease. "Matteo," he murmured, "that is enough. You will bring the house down." The child's answer was a fresh burst of tears. The nanny smoothed her apron nervously. "Excellency, perhaps a change of nurse. There are specialists in Florence, women with experience with difficult temperaments." Lorenzo's mouth thinned. "You were recommended as a specialist." "And I am. But there is grief in the house, Excellency. The child feels it." He did not answer. His shoulders stiffened, just for a heartbeat. The nanny wished she had kept that last sentence to herself. Outside in the servants' courtyard, the morning carried on. A wagon, dusty from the road, had just rattled through the iron gate. A young woman climbed down from it with care, clutching a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth to her chest. She looked around quickly, as if expecting someone to appear and tell her it was all a mistake, and she must go back where she came from. No one did. The courtyard was full of movement, boys carrying crates, a cook scolding an assistant, a groom leading a nervous horse. No one noticed her for a moment. It was a strange feeling, to be so completely invisible in the middle of so much life. She adjusted the shawl over her shoulders and took a breath. "You are here now, Sophia," she whispered to herself. "You do not turn back." A stable boy passed, saw her and stopped. "Are you the new girl for the kitchen?" "I am Sophia Ricci," she said. "I was told to present myself to the major domo." He jerked his chin toward a side door. "Inside, second door to the left. You will know him. He shouts at everyone." Sophia nodded her thanks and stepped into the cool shadow of the house. Inside, the air smelled of soap and boiled vegetables. Voices echoed from the kitchen. She followed the boy's directions and soon found herself standing before a heavy door, listening to a man's voice counting silver spoons. She raised her hand and knocked. "Come in," the voice snapped. The man behind the desk was thin and straight as a cane, with a severe nose and hair pulled back neatly at the nape. Ledgers lay open before him, lines of careful writing spreading across the pages. "You are late," he said, looking up. "I came as quickly as I could, signore," Sophia answered. "The wagon from the village was delayed." He studied her face, her worn dress, the neat braid of dark hair coiled at the back of her head. Name, Sophia Ricci. His pen paused over the ledger. For a heartbeat, his eyes narrowed, as if the name had brushed against a half-buried memory. Then he shook it off and wrote it down. "You will be a general maid," he said. "You will scrub, polish, carry water, and do whatever else is required. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not address the family unless directly asked a question. You will remain in the servants' quarters unless summoned elsewhere. Have you experience in service? Yes, signore, she replied. I worked in the house of Signor Bellini in the town, and before that, I helped my mother keep our home. He made a non-committal sound. Bellini. He flipped through a small stack of letters. His reference is acceptable. I warn you, this house is not kind to idleness. We are in a time of sorrow. There must be no noise, no confusion. Do you understand? Yes, signore. He dipped his pen, then stopped. You said Ricci. From which village? She hesitated. From San Giusto, signore. His gaze sharpened again. San Giusto. That is Bianchi land. Her fingers tightened on the bundle she held. So they said, signore. He watched her a moment longer, then waved his hand. You will have time to speak of villages later. For now, report to the housekeeper. She will find you a corner to sleep in and a brush for your hands. Yes, signore, she murmured, backing away. As she stepped into the corridor, a faint sound reached her, thin, high, and piercing. A child crying. The walls made it distant, but even so, it ran along her spine like a cold finger. The Bianchi Palazzo, she thought. Even the child cries as if the earth itself aches. She shook the thought away. It was foolish to think such things. She had come for work, not for ghosts. The housekeeper, a stout woman named Signora Rosa, glanced her over with a brisk eye and pressed a rag and bucket into her hands almost before her name had left her lips. You will start with the back stairs, Rosa said. They are muddy from the rain, and the Count likes order. Leave your bundle on that shelf. We will talk about blankets later. Keep your head down and your ears open and mind the bells. Bells? Sophia asked. The nursery bell, the Count's bell, the dining room bell. They ring. We move. You will learn. The bells did ring. They rang from worn cords on the walls and from small brass pulls in the servants' corridors. They rang for hot water, for forgotten items, for clumsy mistakes. But above all bells, the baby's cries rang louder. As Sophia knelt in the back stairwell and scrubbed at the muddy steps, the sound grew clearer. Somewhere above her, the child refused to be soothed. She tried to focus on the brush in her hand, on the way the grit lifted from the stone. Each stroke was a coin, she told herself. Each step that grew clean was one more day of bread. She would not think of San Giusto and wheat fields and a father whose hands had always smelled of earth and iron. Are you deaf, girl? Rosa's voice snapped from above. Move faster. The Count has guests at midday. Yes, signora, Sophia answered, hurrying. Upstairs in the nursery, the midday guests were already making themselves felt. The nanny had changed Matteo's linen, rocked him, sung, carried him to the window to see the pale winter sun. Nothing helped. His cries only grew more ragged. If he continues like this, he will make himself ill, she said. A maid hovered nervously near the door. Shall I fetch a physician, signora? If we called the physician every time the child cries, he would sleep here, the nanny muttered. No, the Count will be here in a moment. He does not like others to see his son in such a state. The maid swallowed and smoothed the edge of the cradle. They say he never cried when the Countess held him. Who says? The kitchen maids. They heard it from the laundress. The laundress hears too much, Signora Bianca answered, but her voice had lost some of its sharpness. The door opened again. Lorenzo entered, the major domo at his shoulder. Excellency, the child... I can hear, Lorenzo said. The baby's sobs filled the room. He walked to the cradle and looked down, his expression unreadable. Matteo kicked and curled his hands, his cries cutting through the quiet words adults exchanged above his head. He has taken milk, Lorenzo asked. Yes, Excellency. He is clean, warm. Yes, Excellency. Then why does he cry like that? The nanny hesitated. Some children do, Excellency. They feel things they cannot say. It may be the change of nurses. The house has been in mourning. He lost his mother too soon. Something flickered in Lorenzo's eyes. He cannot lose what he has never truly known, he said, but his voice was low. The major domo cleared his throat. The guests await you in the drawing room, Excellency. They have come from the city. They will wait, Lorenzo cut in. My son will not scream himself senseless while I pour wine for them. The major domo stepped back, unsure. Lorenzo held out his arms. Give him to me. The nanny obeyed, relieved and anxious at once. He took Matteo and began to walk with him, the way he had learned in those first raw weeks after the Countess's death. One slow step, then another, the rhythmic sway, the gentle pat on the back. "Matteo," he murmured. "You have a strong voice, but you do not need to use it every hour of the day." The child cried on, his face pressed into his father's chest, little fists beating at the air. Down below, the bells rang again. Distant voices rose. The meal had come. The guests had arrived. The house was expected to show its best face. Only one infant's grief refused to obey the rhythm. Sophia finished the stairs and straightened, rubbing her damp hands on her skirt. Her shoulders ached. Her knees were sore. But the worst ache was inside, stirred each time the baby cried and would not stop. She picked up the bucket, intending to return it to the back kitchen, when a door overhead slammed and footsteps hurried along the corridor. A maid rushed down the stairs, skirts lifted to avoid the damp stone. "You there," the maid said, spotting Sophia. "You will have to fetch fresh linens for the nursery. The child has been changed 3 times already." "I was told to return this to the kitchen," Sophia replied. "The nursery outranks the kitchen," the maid said. "You are new, so you may not know. Come, they will be angry if you are slow." Sophia put down the bucket and followed, wiping her hands on her apron. The maid led her up a narrower staircase, one that branched away from the servants' quarters and rose toward the private rooms. "We are not allowed," Sophia began. "You are allowed if you are sent," the maid cut in. "Do not gawk. Keep your eyes to the floor." They reached a landing where the air smelled of polished wood rather than stone. The maid thrust a stack of folded cloths into Sophia's hands. "Here, carry these, and mind your tongue. That is the nursery door there. You will not go inside unless they call you." The maid pushed the door open just enough to slide through. Sophia waited in the corridor, the linens hugged to her chest. She could hear everything clearly now. "Ta refuses every nurse we bring," a woman's voice said, strained. "He refused you as well?" a man's voice answered, clipped. "Yes, Excellency." Matteo's cries filled the pause. Sophia stared at the pattern of the carpet beneath her feet, as if it could steady her. The Bianchi Palazzo, she thought again. Its walls had always seemed distant to her village. For years, she had imagined them as hard and smooth, untroubled by wind or winter. To stand inside them now and hear that raw human sound made them seem less like stone and more like a body that could feel. There was a sudden scuffle inside, a soft exclamation, the rustle of fabric. Then the maid who had brought her in reappeared at the door, looking panicked. "They need more hands," she whispered. "The child will not be soothed. The Count is in a rage. Stay here." She slipped back in and closed the door most of the way, leaving it slightly ajar. It was only a crack, but it was enough for sound to spill out. The nanny's attempted lullaby dissolved into frustration. The majordomo's voice offered some suggestion that was quickly dismissed. The baby's cries rose higher. Then Lorenzo spoke again, quieter now. "Everyone out," he said. "Excellency." "Out," he repeated sharper. "You will all go. I will stay with my son." The door opened wider. The nanny emerged, flushed and shaken. The maid followed, eyes wide. The majordomo came last, his face tight. "We are to leave him be," the majordomo said. "Go back to your duties, the Count insists." The hallway began to empty. Sophia watched them pass, the folded linens still heavy in her arms. Inside the nursery, the baby's cry climbed to a note she recognized too well. It was the same sound she had made in her own chest years ago, when everything she had known was pulled away. She heard Lorenzo pacing, heard the soft thud of his steps. Then she heard him speak, low and firm. "That is enough, Matteo. You must breathe. Listen to me. It is only you and I now." The child answered with a hoarse cry that seemed to scrape the air. The maid who had escorted Sophia tugged at her sleeve. "Come," he said, "everyone." Sophia did not move. Her legs felt rooted to the carpet. "He is hurting his little voice," she murmured, almost to herself. "It is not our place," the maid said. Perhaps it was not. Sophia knew the shape of "not your place," as well as she knew her own hands. It had shaped her life since the first time her father came home, eyes dark, saying the estate had changed, that the Bianchi name no longer brought bread to their table. Another sob tore through the door, raw and broken. Without thinking it through, without truly deciding, Sophia took a step forward. "I can calm him," she said. The words escaped before she could pull them back. The maid stared at her. "What did you say?" She swallowed. Her heart hammered against the linens in her arms. "I can try," she said more quietly, "to calm him, if no one else can." "That is madness," the maid whispered. "He is the Count's son." "I know what it is to cry like that," Sophia answered softly. "Sometimes one voice is not enough, sometimes you need another." The major domo, who had been conferring with the nanny a few paces away, heard the last of those words. He turned, his expression a mixture of irritation and disbelief. "What are you saying, girl?" he demanded. Sophia forced herself not to flinch. "Signore, forgive me. I only meant, if the child cannot be soothed, and the Count is alone, perhaps another pair of arms. Are you a nurse?" The nanny cut in sharply. "No, signora." "Have you raised children of the nobility?" "No, signora. Only my sister's baby in the village." "Then you are not qualified," the nanny said. "Do not speak of matters beyond you." Her cheeks burned. "Yes, signora, I only wish to help." The major domo was about to send her away when another cry came from inside, even more strained than before. It was followed by a sound none of them were used to hearing from Lorenzo, a low, helpless sigh. "I do not know what you want from me, my son," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "If I could give you everything, I would. But I do not know how to give you sleep." The hallway held its breath. The major domo hesitated. The nanny looked uncertain for the first time that morning. Even the maid beside Sophia shifted her weight, torn between propriety and pity. Finally, the major domo muttered, "The Count is at his wit's end. If there is the smallest chance." He looked at Sophia. "You, what did you say your name is?" "Sophia Ricci, signore." "You think you can calm him?" "I do not know, signore," she answered honestly. "I only know that I can try." He studied her a moment longer. Then he sighed as if he had just agreed to something that would haunt him. "Very well," he said. "You will go in. You will ask permission to approach. You will touch nothing without the Count's order. Do you understand?" "Yes, signore." The nanny bristled. "This is highly improper. A peasant girl? If the Count is displeased, I will take responsibility," the majordomo said. "We cannot allow the child to cry himself sick." He pushed the door open and stepped aside. "Go," he told Sophia. Her feet felt heavy, but they moved. She crossed the threshold into the nursery, and for a brief moment, the world outside the room disappeared. Matteo lay in his father's arms, small body taut with distress. His face was red and damp, his breaths broken. Lorenzo stood by the window now, as if he had been seeking fresh air, but nothing in the pale winter light had soothed his son. He turned at the sound of the door and saw Sophia. His brows drew together. "I sent everyone away," he said. "Did you not understand?" The majordomo cleared his throat from the doorway. "Excellency, this is the new maid. She believes she may be able to calm the child." Lorenzo's gaze sharpened. "The new maid?" Sophia lowered her eyes. "Forgive me, Excellency. I did not mean to intrude. I only thought—" "What did you think?" he asked. She swallowed. "That I might try to soothe him, if you permit it." The baby cried again, voice cracking. The sound filled the small silence that followed her words. Lorenzo's first instinct was refusal. It rose in him like an old habit. One did not pass an heir from stranger to stranger. One did not invite a maid to step forward where trained nurses had failed. But his arms ached from holding Matteo. His head throbbed. The child's grief scraped against his own, leaving him raw. He looked at Sophia more closely. Her dress was plain, but clean. Her hands, clutching the folded cloths, were reddened from scrubbing. Her eyes were dark and clear, and in them he saw no calculation, only concern. "You have experience with children?" he asked. "Only with my sister's baby," she said quietly. "But he would cry like this, Excellency, until his little body trembled. My mother used to say some children need a certain way of being held, a rhythm, a voice that does not press them, only waits for them." Lorenzo glanced at the majordomo, who spread his hands helplessly. The nanny looked ready to protest again, but another of Matteo's sobs cut her off. He felt the decision pull at him. Tradition on one side, his son's suffering on the other. At last he said, "Very well, you may try, but I will not leave the room." "Of course, Excellency," Sophia murmured. She stepped closer, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. The baby's cries did not lessen, but his eyes flicked toward her movement, wide and unfocused. "May I?" she asked Lorenzo, lifting her arms slightly. He hesitated only a heartbeat, then shifted Matteo toward her. The child protested the movement, but when his small body settled into the cradle of her arms, something changed. Her hands knew the weight at once. She tucked his head into the hollow of her shoulder, supporting it with a steadiness born of practice in a poorer house where no nurse had ever come. She did not bounce or pat at once. She simply held him, breathing slowly, letting her own heartbeat settle. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "That is a great noise you have." Her voice was soft, the vowels colored by the countryside. Matteo's cries faltered for a fraction of a second, then resumed. But the rhythm was weaker now, as if his lungs were tired. Sophia began to sway, not with sharp movements, but with a gentle, almost imperceptible rocking. It matched her breath. In, out, a step forward, a step back. "When my sister's boy would cry," she murmured, more to the child than to the room. "My father used to say, 'The world is too big for him today. Make it small.' So we would give him our arms and our voices, and that was his world, until he was ready for the rest." Lorenzo watched, silent. The majordomo hovered at the door. The nanny's hands twisted in her apron. Sophia began to hum, a low melody without words. It was not a church hymn, nor a fashionable song from the city. It was older, simpler. It carried the rhythm of a man walking behind an ox, of seeds falling into furrows, of evenings when the sky grew soft and the air cooled. The sound wrapped around Matteo like a shawl. His cries broke, then began again, then broke once more. One tiny hand crept up and clutched at the fabric of Sophia's dress. His face pressed deeper into her shoulder, as if he were searching for something solid. She shifted him slightly, found the angle where his small body relaxed more fully against hers. Her humming continued, steady as a heartbeat. Slowly the nursery changed. The harsh sound of wailing thinned, faded, became a series of hiccuping breaths. Then even those grew quiet. Lorenzo took a step closer. The child lay cradled against Sophia, eyes half closed, his chest rising and falling in tired, peaceful rhythm. A few last tears clung to his lashes. His fingers stayed curled in her apron, not in panic now, but in trust. There was a silence so complete that they all felt it. The nanny's mouth fell open. The majordomo's shoulders sagged with relief he tried not to show. Lorenzo simply stared, as if he had been struck by something invisible. Sophia did not notice their faces at first. Her gaze was on Matteo. She rocked him a little longer, humming until she felt certain his calm was real. Then slowly, she looked up. Her eyes met Lorenzo's. For a brief instant, neither looked away. In his face, she saw astonishment, yes, but also something softer, something wounded and questioning. In hers he saw no triumph, only a cautious wonder and an anxious fear that this fragile piece could be snatched away at any moment. She lowered her gaze quickly. "He is only tired, Excellency," she said. "Anyone could have soothed him if given time." "No," Lorenzo replied quietly. "Not anyone." The majordomo cleared his throat. "It seems the child has taken a liking to this girl, Excellency. Perhaps it is a passing thing, a novelty." Matteo made a small sound, not a cry, but a contented sigh. His fingers tightened on Sophia's dress. Lorenzo looked at his son, then at the young woman holding him. "What is your name?" he asked her. "Sophia, Excellency. Sophia Ricci." Her surname brushed against that old memory again, faint and indistinct. He let it pass for the moment. "Well, Sophia Ricci," he said slowly, "it appears my son has chosen you." The nanny bristled. "Excellency, I must object. This girl is a maid. She has not been trained. There are proper nurses, respectable women, and yet none of them can keep my son from screaming," Lorenzo answered, his tone cool. "While a maid from the countryside can." The nanny flushed, opened her mouth, then closed it. Sophia shifted her weight, being careful not to disturb the sleeping child. "Excellency, I did not mean to offend anyone. I can return to my other duties. If you wish, I will only come when they have tried everything else." Lorenzo's gaze swept the room, The rumpled cradle, the drawn faces of his staff, the quiet child who had been the center of so much noise. He had guests waiting. His aunt would not approve. The housekeeper would complain about a missing pair of hands. The arrangement made no sense according to any rule he knew, but Matteo lay sleeping in the arms of a girl who had walked in from the servants' corridors and done what no one else had been able to do. He straightened. "No," he said. "You will not return to scrubbing floors. Not for now." The majordomo blinked. "Excellency?" Lorenzo's voice left no room for doubt. "This maid will remain by my son's side." The room seemed to tilt. The nanny's mouth fell open. The majordomo stared. The maid by the door crossed herself quickly as if trying to ward off trouble. Sophia's arms tightened around the sleeping child without her meaning to. Her heart beat so loud she could hear it in her ears. "Excellency," the nanny began, "with all respect, the care of an infant of this rank requires skill, discipline. This girl has been here one morning only." "She has done more in one morning than all your skill in many weeks," Lorenzo said. "That is not an insult, only a fact." The nanny flushed. "The child is in a particular state because of his loss. Some days are more difficult. Today may be a coincidence." Lorenzo's gaze did not leave Sophia. "Is it a coincidence, do you think?" She shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Matteo. "I do not know, Excellency. Children choose people for reasons we cannot see. Today he chose me. Tomorrow, perhaps he will choose someone else." The truth of it made something twist in her chest. "Until he does," Lorenzo said, "you will be available to him." The majordomo cleared his throat. "Excellency, the house depends on every pair of hands. If this girl is diverted from her duties—" "You will adjust the duties," Lorenzo replied. "See that she is not overburdened. Her first priority is the child." "Yes, Excellency," the majordomo said reluctantly. Sophia found her voice. "Please, Excellency, the other tasks—" "Will be done by other people," Lorenzo interrupted. "My son has known too much loss already. I will not take from him the one person who has managed to give him peace." His tone was not unkind, but it allowed no argument. "Very well," the nanny said stiffly. "If I am not needed—" "You are needed," Lorenzo said. "You will continue to oversee his health, feeding, medicines, whatever he requires. But if he cries, you will send for her at once. Is that clear?" The nanny's lips pressed into a line. "Yes, Excellency." He nodded once, then looked back at Sophia. "You may lay him down now," he said more gently, "if he will allow it." Sophia stepped toward the cradle. The nanny watched her like a hawk, ready to correct any move. Sophia bent, keeping Matteo close until the last moment, then eased him onto the soft mattress. For a second his face tightened, his mouth trembled. She rested her palm lightly on his chest. "Shh," she whispered. "I am here. You may sleep." His lashes fluttered. His hand, still curled in her apron, slipped loose. He let out a long breath and settled. The room exhaled with him. Lorenzo's shoulders dropped. The tightness around his eyes eased by a shade. "You will remain nearby," he said. "If he wakes and cries, they will call you." "Yes, Excellency," Sophia replied. She stepped back. The lullaby still hummed softly in her throat, though she did not give it voice. The majordomo gestured toward the door. "Come, I will explain your new duties." She followed him out, aware of the nanny's eyes on her back. In the corridor, the maid who had first brought her linens stared as if she was seeing a ghost. "What did you do?" the maid whispered. "I held him," Sophia said quietly. "You must be mad," the maid muttered. "Mad or blessed. Either way, the other women will not like it." Sophia knew that without being told. Her days rearranged themselves. The bucket and brush remained in the corner, but the call to scrub floors came less often. The bell from the nursery rang more. By mid-morning she had been summoned 3 times. The first time Matteo woke suddenly and refused the nurse's arms. The second, he began to cry when the nanny tried to change him. The third, he would not drink unless Sophia held him. She tried to stay out of the way. She stood back when the nanny prepared the milk, when she measured out the soothing drops from the doctor's bottle. But whenever the baby's face crumpled, his arms reached for Sophia as if drawn by a thread. Each time she took him, his body relaxed in her arms, as if her chest were a door into some small, quiet room, denied to the rest of the house. By afternoon, everyone knew. In the kitchen, Rosa slammed pots with more force than necessary. "So, now, a village girl gives orders to the nursery," she grumbled. "Next, she will rearrange my shelves." "She gives no orders," the maid protested. "She only walks in and the child stops crying. It is not her fault." "It is her fortune," Rosa said, "and the fortune of some is the misfortune of others. The nurses will not bear it long, nor the Count's aunt." In the laundry, the women shook out sheets and gossip in equal measure. "They say the baby smiles at her," one said. "At a maid? Nonsense. My cousin works above stairs. She saw it. He smiled right up at her as if she were a princess." "A princess," another scoffed. "Princess of the broom, perhaps." They laughed, but uneasily. In the stables, the coachman spat into the straw. "I tell you, it is a strange house now," he said. "The master calls for a maid more often than for the head groom." "You think he fancies her?" a boy asked with a grin. The coachman cuffed his ear. "Mind your tongue. The man is in mourning. But a house where a baby will only sleep with a servant in his arms, it is an upside-down world." The words travelled up the servants' stairs and seeped under doors. Sophia heard them one way or another. Once, as she left the nursery, she passed 2 kitchen girls whispering in a corner. "Clings to her like a barn cat," one said, "and she walks in the family corridor as if she belongs." "She does not belong," the other replied, "no matter what the child thinks." The girls fell silent when they saw Sophia, then giggled and pretended to be busy with their baskets. Sophia kept walking, her face calm, her stomach tight. It was better in the nursery. The child had no malice, no gossip. He had only his small, simple needs. When she crossed the threshold, he often greeted her with a bright, wet-eyed smile that made her forget for a moment every sharp word. One afternoon, as she cradled him after a nap, the door opened and another woman entered. She was smaller than Lorenzo, but carried herself with a firmness that made people step aside. Her hair was streaked with silver and coiled neatly. Her dark dress was perfectly fitted, her lace collar immaculate. "Countess Vittoria," the nanny said quickly. Sophia rose at once, lowering her eyes. The baby made a soft sound of protest at the movement. She adjusted him with care. The countess walked closer, looking first at the child, then at Sophia. "So this is the one," Vittoria said. "The miracle maid." Sophia's cheeks warmed. "I am no miracle, your ladyship." "Yet the boy sleeps when you hold him," Vittoria replied. "That is miracle enough in this house." Her tone held no softness. The nanny stepped forward. "Your ladyship, it is a temporary arrangement. The child was in great distress. The Count ordered that she be kept nearby." Vittoria lifted a hand. "I am aware of my nephew's instructions." She turned fully to Sophia. "Your name," she said. "Sophia Ricci, your ladyship." "From where?" "From the village of San Giusto." Vittoria's eyes narrowed just slightly, as if the name brushed an old thought. "San Giusto," she repeated. "The Ricci family used to serve on Bianchi land." "Yes, your ladyship," Sophia answered, her voice steady with effort. "Used to," Vittoria said. "What does your father do now?" Sophia's throat closed for a moment. "He has passed, your ladyship." Vittoria inclined her head a fraction, as if acknowledging a minor inconvenience. "And your mother?" "She is at home. My younger sister cares for her, with the help of my brother-in-law." "So they sent you here to earn a wage," Vittoria said. "How practical." "Yes, your ladyship." Vittoria's gaze slid to Matteo. The baby was watching her with open curiosity, his little hand still tangled in Sophia's sleeve. "He has grown," she said. "He should be resting in his cradle, not attached to a servant all day." The nanny seized the chance. "We try, your ladyship. He wakes at once when she puts him down." "Perhaps he wakes because she holds him too much," Vittoria said. "Children become accustomed to certain indulgences, then they refuse proper order." The words pricked. Sophia bit the inside of her cheek. "I only hold him when he cries," she said quietly. Vittoria's gaze snapped back to her. "You speak without being addressed." Sophia lowered her head. "Forgive me, your ladyship. There is much to forgive in this arrangement," Vittoria murmured. "Still, I cannot argue with a quiet nursery. For now." She moved back toward the door. At the threshold, she glanced over her shoulder. "Remember this, girl," she said. "You stand here because a grieving child takes comfort in your arms. That is all. It makes you useful, not important. Do not forget your place. No, your ladyship, Sophia whispered. When the door closed, the room felt smaller. The nanny busied herself with the linens, her lips tight. She is right, the nanny said at last. This cannot last. Children change. They will forget. You should not grow used to this room. Sophia looked down at Matteo. His lashes cast small shadows on his cheeks. His breath warmed the crook of her elbow. I will not grow used to anything, she said softly. I simply do what is asked of me. She tried after that to keep a little distance. When he slept soundly, she stepped back from the cradle. When he was calm in the nanny's arms, she slipped out to complete some small task in the corridor. She told herself it was safer that way for him. For her, it did not work. The next days proved it. When the nanny attempted to rock him in the afternoon, he twisted and reached, searching. When a maid tried to carry him to the window, he cried until his face turned red. When the nanny finally sighs and said, "Call her," he quieted at once, just hearing Sophia's steps. "You see," the nurse said grudgingly, "he knows the sound of her walk. He is bewitched." "I do not know how to bewitch anyone," Sophia said, half amused, half tired. "I only know how to hold him." The maid giggled. "Perhaps that is all it takes." In the evenings, when the house grew dim and quiet, Lorenzo sometimes appeared at the nursery door. He no longer came storming in with questions. Instead, he would pause and watch for a moment. Once he found Sophia sitting in the big chair by the window, Matteo asleep on her shoulder. The lamp nearby threw a soft circle of light over them. "You should put him down," Lorenzo said. "You will grow numb in that chair." "If I move, he wakes," she answered. He had colic this afternoon. The physician said it was nothing, but he was not the one listening to the cries. Lorenzo's mouth twitched. He stepped closer and reached out a hand. For a second, Sophia thought he might touch the child. Instead, he brushed a crease out of the blanket. "He sleeps," Lorenzo said. "For that, I would endure 1,000 scoldings from my aunt." "She does not like me here," Sophia murmured before she could stop herself. "She does not like anything that disturbs her idea of order," he said. "You are not order. You are a change." She shifted uncertainly. "If I am a trouble, Excellency, I can ask to be sent elsewhere in the house, the kitchen perhaps, or the laundry." He looked at her. "Do you wish to be sent elsewhere?" She hesitated. "I do not wish to be the cause of displeasure." "That was not my question," he said. She glanced down at Matteo. The child's small lips were parted in sleep. His hand clutched at a fold of her apron. "I wish for him to sleep," she said at last. "Wherever I can be of use for that, I will be content." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Then you will stay here," he said. "The rest is my concern." He left before she could answer. It went on like that for some days. Warmth and cold, kindness and warnings, all threading through the same small room. Then came Sunday luncheon. It was a modest gathering, the major domo said. Only the family and a few close acquaintances. A proper meal to remind the world that the house still stood, that life, though altered by mourning, continued according to custom. The servants moved faster than usual. Silver was polished twice. Mrs. Rosa inspected every dish herself. The dining room glowed, echoing with the murmur of dignified voices. In the nursery, the nanny fussed with Matteo's fine clothes. "The Count wishes him to be seen," she said. "Only for a moment. Do not frown, little one. This lace is softer than anything in the world." Matteo squirmed and let out a small protest. "He does not like lace," Sophia observed. "It is not his place to like or dislike," the nanny declared. "He wears what is suitable." Lorenzo appeared, dressed formally, his expression controlled. "Are you ready?" he asked. "The child is dressed, Excellency," the nanny replied. "He has nursed. He should manage a short time." Lorenzo nodded. His gaze flicked to Sophia. "You will come as well," he said. She blinked. "Excellency?" "If he cries, I prefer not to make a spectacle," he said. "You will remain at the door. If he grows distressed, you will take him back at once." The nanny's mouth tightened. "Is that necessary, Excellency?" "It is practical," he answered. Sophia bowed her head. "As you wish, Excellency." They descended together. The nanny carried Matteo, who examined the changing surroundings with wide eyes. Sophia followed, feeling every step. At the entrance to the dining room, she stopped. "Here," the majordomo murmured. "You will wait here. Try not to be seen." She pressed her back against the wall just beyond the doorway, where she could hear and partially see the long table, but the guests would see only a shadow if they noticed her at all. The guests had gathered. Lorenzo's aunt sat at one end, her back straight. On either side of the table, men and women of his rank murmured and smiled, exchanging remarks about weather and politics, land and crops. When Lorenzo entered with the nanny and child, heads turned. "Ah, Lorenzo," an older man said. "There is the young lord. How he has grown," a lady exclaimed. "He has his mother's brow." Lorenzo forced a polite smile. "Matteo," he said quietly, "these are your family and friends." The nanny shifted him, trying to present him to the room. He frowned. The voices, the light, the unfamiliar faces, all pressed on him. His mouth trembled. Sophia held her breath. For one hopeful moment, he stayed quiet. Then a plate clinked loudly. Someone laughed too sharply at some remark. The sound startled him. His lower lip quivered. His eyes filled. His face screwed up. The first cry tore out of him, thin and unsure. The nanny bounced him quickly. "There now, it is only a little noise." Another laugh, another clatter. The second cry came stronger. "He is not accustomed to company," Vittoria said with a smooth smile. "In time he will learn." The cries built. Matteo turned his head as much as he could, searching. He looked past the nanny's shoulder, toward the doorway, toward the shadow where Sophia stood. He saw a familiar shape. His arms flung out. His cry changed from general distress to a specific plea. Several guests turned. "Whom is he reaching for?" one asked. The nanny tried to rock him in the opposite direction, angling him away from the door. "Hush," she whispered. "Hush now. Do not shame your father." The words only made him cry louder. Lorenzo's jaw flexed. "Bring him," he said quietly. "Take him to the door. Excellency, your guests will understand that my son is a child and not an ornament," he said. The nanny obeyed. She carried Matteo toward the door, where Sophia waited, trying to make herself small against the wall. The child reached for her with desperate little hands. Sophia stepped forward before anyone could speak. She took him quickly, smoothly, as if they had done it 100 times. His cries faltered at once. He buried his face in her neck, sobbing a few last hiccups into her skin. The room fell silent. A dozen eyes fixed on the scene, the formally dressed count, the elegant guests, the wealthy table, and a maid in a plain dress, holding the air as if he belonged to her. For a moment, no one spoke. Then someone let out a short, amused breath. "Well," a gentleman said lightly, "it appears the young count has simple tastes." Laughter rippled around the table. "Children have poor judgment," another woman said with a chuckle. "They will always choose soft arms, no matter whose they are." "Still," a third voice added, "it says something, does it not? The child refuses nurses and embraces a village girl. Perhaps grief makes us all reach down instead of up." The words landed like small stones. Vittoria's smile did not change, but the muscle in her cheek jumped. Lorenzo's gaze hardened. For a second, Sophia thought he would speak. He did not. Instead, he inclined his head slightly. "It seems we have discovered what comforts him," he said. "That is all. Does the maid have a name?" one woman asked, peering toward the doorway with interest. "She is a servant," Vittoria cut in smoothly. "We have so many. It is hard to keep track, is it not, Lorenzo?" Her tone dared him to contradict her. He hesitated. It was only just long enough to be seen. "Yes," he said at last. "We have many." Sophia felt the silence behind that answer. It sat heavy on her shoulders. She did not look at him. She focused on Matthew. "Shh," she whispered again. "We will go back upstairs, little one. This room is too crowded for you." She turned, intending to retreat. "Wait," Vittoria's voice called. Sophia froze and faced the room again, careful to keep her eyes low. "You may as well be of some use while you are here," Vittoria said. "Bring the child forward so everyone can see his face. He is a Bianchi. We are not ashamed of him." There was no graciousness in the words. Sophia stepped back into the room, the press of noble eyes on her like heat. She moved slowly along the table, holding Matteo so his relatives could admire him. Several softened at the sight of his round cheeks and still damp lashes. They cooed and reached to touch his hand. He tolerated it only because his grip on Sophia's dress did not loosen. "Poor little lamb," one lady murmured. "He knows who truly comforts him." "What village did you say you were from?" another asked. Sophia kept her gaze on the tablecloth. "San Giusto, my lady." "Ah," the woman said, as if that explained everything. "Children of the soil. They are used to animals and babies. It is natural they handle them well." The comment was not cruel, but it placed her somewhere between livestock and laundry. They asked small questions about his sleeping and his eating, as if she were no more than an extension of his cradle. When she answered, some listened, some did not. One gentleman turned away in the middle of her sentence to address someone else across the table. "And your parents?" another voice asked suddenly. Sophia recognized it. Vittoria. She forced her throat to work. "My father has passed, your ladyship. My mother remains in the village." "From service to service," Vittoria said, loud enough for all to hear. "It is often so with such families. One generation in the barn, the next in the kitchen, the next in the nursery. It is fortunate for you, child, that our house has need of hands." A few chuckles drifted down the table. Sophia's cheeks burned. Her ears rang. She felt as if she had been stripped in the middle of the room and measured for everyone's amusement. She clutched Matteo a little closer. "Yes, your ladyship," she said softly. "It is fortunate." Lorenzo's chair scraped. "Enough," he said quietly. The sound cut through the laughter, thin as it was. Vittoria lifted one brow. "We are only speaking of practical matters. The girl must learn to accept her place with good humor." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He looked at Sophia, standing at the center of the room with his child in her arms and humiliation on her face. For a second, she hoped he would say something more, something that would lift at least a little of the weight. His mouth opened, then closed. He reached for his wine instead. "Take him back to the nursery," he said, not unkindly. "He has had enough excitement." "Yes, Excellency," she murmured. She walked out, the baby's head tucked under her chin, the murmur of voices rising behind her. As the door closed, she heard a man say under his breath, "No wonder the child cries. What a strange house, where nobles bow to fortune and infants cling to servants." The words followed her up the stairs. In the corridor outside the nursery, she stopped and leaned against the wall for a moment, eyes closed. "You should not listen," she whispered to herself. "Words cannot knock you down unless you lie flat for them." The effort it took to believe that sentence made her throat ache. Inside, she laid Matteo in his cradle. He stirred, then settled again, soothed by the relative quiet. She stood watching him a long time. The house felt different now. The kitchen girl's giggles, the laundress's comments, the coachman's mutters, they all pressed on her in a new way. She was not only a maid now, she had become something else, a curiosity, a problem, an accident everyone wanted to discuss. She thought of her mother, sitting by the small window in San Giusto, staring at the fields her husband had once walked. She thought of her sister's tired smile, of the promise she had made to send money. It twisted together with Vittoria's voice, from the barn to the kitchen to the nursery. Perhaps they were right, Sophia thought. Perhaps she had climbed as high as she could. Perhaps she was reaching for something that was bound to be snatched away. That evening, after the lamps were lowered and the house grew quiet, she sat on the narrow bed in the servants' room and folded her few belongings into her bundle. If she left now, she told herself, she could find work in another house. One where no one knew the name Ricci, where no baby clung to her as if she were his whole world. Her fingers shook as she tied the cloth. She rose, lifted the bundle, and took one step toward the door. At that exact moment, a thin, trembling cry rose from the heart of the house, winding through the corridors until it reached her like a hand on her sleeve. The cry threaded through the boards and stone, thin at first, then sharper. Sophia froze with her hand on the latch. Her bundle hung from her fingers. The sound came again, more desperate now. It rose and broke, as if the child's lungs were too small for his grief. She closed her eyes. "You are leaving," she whispered to herself. "You decided." The cry climbed higher. It was different from the noises the other servants' children made. There was a wildness in it, as if he were calling for someone in particular, and the world kept sending him strangers. Her fingers loosened from the bundle. It dropped onto the bed with a soft thud. She opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The house was not fully asleep. Lamps still burned low near the main staircase. Somewhere someone laughed too loudly, trying to shake off the stiffness of the luncheon. In the distance, a door closed with a careful click. But over everything, that one sound. She moved toward it without thinking. Her feet knew the way now. Up one narrow flight, down the long passage, past the window where the moon drew a pale line on the floor, to the door she had come to think of as the edge of another world. The nursery door stood open a crack. Light spilled into the hallway. She heard the nanny's strained voice. "He has been like this since the Count took dinner, signore. I do not understand it." The major domo, weary, answered, "Try the drops again." "I have." Twice. Matteo's cry split the air again. Sophia stepped closer. She could see the edge of the cradle, the nanny's anxious figure, the shadow of a man pacing. Lorenzo's voice came low and rough. "You say he took milk?" "Yes, Excellency. He is not fevered." "No, Excellency. He is simply inconsolable." "Inconsolable," Lorenzo repeated, as if that were a natural state for a child. He stopped pacing and braced his hands on the back of a chair. His shoulders rose and fell with his breath. "Shall I fetch the physician?" the major domo asked. "He will say what he always says," Lorenzo replied, "that children cry. That time will help. Time has helped nothing in this house." Sophia's hand pressed against the door. It opened a little further with a soft creak. The nanny looked up and saw her. Her eyes flashed. "You," she said. "You should not be here." Matteo turned his head at the sound. His cries hitched for a second. Sophia swallowed. "I heard him," she said. "If you wish, I will go." Lorenzo straightened. He looked from Sophia to the child and back. The cries resumed louder. "If she is here," he said tightly, "let her try. It cannot make matters worse." The nanny hesitated, then stepped back from the cradle. "Come, then," she said shortly. "Do your magic." "There is no magic," Sophia answered, but she moved forward. She lifted the baby. His small body was rigid with tension. He sobbed against her neck, as if his heart would burst. She held him close and began that small, steady sway he knew. Her voice came without bidding, the old tune her father had whistled under the apple tree. "Hush, little one," she murmured between the notes. "The night is big, but you are not alone." The change was not instant this time. His cries shuddered and broke, surged up again, then faded. She did not rush him. She simply stood, breathing, swaying, singing. After a few minutes, the sobs softened to hiccups. His hand clutched the fabric of her dress. His breathing evened. The room let out a breath, too. The nanny busied herself with a cloth, pretending she had never doubted. The major domo stared at the floor. Lorenzo watched Sophia's profile as she sang. "Thank you," he said quietly, when the last of the sobs faded. She did not turn. "He was only frightened, Excellency." "Of what?" he asked. She thought of bright lights, loud voices, sharp laughter. "Too many faces," she said. "Too much noise. His world is small. When we make it too big, he pulls it tight again in the only way he knows." Lorenzo looked at his son's damp lashes, the way his small fingers would not let go of her dress. "You were leaving," he said suddenly. She stilled. "Excellency." "You have a bundle on your bed," the major domo blurted, then looked guilty. Rosa must have told him. Sophia exhaled. There was no point in denying it now. "I thought perhaps it would be better for everyone," she said. "Your aunt does not approve. The house whispers. I did not wish to be the cause of more trouble." "And my son?" Lorenzo asked. She looked down at Matteo. His breathing was slow now, his lips slightly parted. "He would cry," she answered simply. "For some days. Then he would learn to be comforted by someone else." Her chest ached saying it. "And you?" Lorenzo asked. She hesitated. "I would find work where my name matters less." He frowned. "Your name?" She shook her head. "It is nothing, Excellency. Only that it does not sound pleasing in these halls." His gaze sharpened, but he let it pass. "You will not leave," he said. "Not while my son depends on you." "Excellency," she began. "It is not a request," he said. "If my aunt has objections, she may speak them to me, not to you." There was steel under his fatigue. Sophia bowed her head. "As you wish." She stayed. Days turned into weeks. The air grew colder, frost tracing the windows in the mornings. The nursery remained warm, a small island lit by lamps and the sound of baby babble. Matteo changed. His cries came less often. He began to watch the world around him with bright curiosity. His hands reached for things, for faces, for the curl of light on a crystal hanging by the window. He reached most often for Sophia. He would wake, see her bent over him, and break into a smile so wide it startled even her. "There now," she would laugh softly, "as if I had been gone for years." The nanny grumbled but had to admit in quieter moments, "He prospers with you. I do not like it, but I cannot ignore what I see." Lorenzo came to the nursery regularly, though not always at the same time. Sometimes in the mornings to watch Matteo kick and crow on the blanket, sometimes in the afternoons when official matters weighed too heavily, sometimes late at night when the house was hushed and his steps in the corridor sounded almost guilty. One evening, Sophia sat on the rug with Matteo on her lap, rolling a small wooden ball back and forth between his hands. He followed it with intense concentration, his tongue sticking out slightly. "You see," she said, "the world is not all sorrow. There are balls as well." The door opened. "Has he conquered the kingdom yet?" Lorenzo asked, leaning against the frame. Sophia looked up, startled, then smiled. "Not yet, Excellency. For now he has only conquered this ball." "That is how empires begin," Lorenzo said, walking closer. He knelt, something few men of his rank would bother to do. His long legs folded awkwardly. He looked almost boyish for a moment, despite the lines near his eyes. Matteo's face lit up. "Ah," Lorenzo murmured. "So you remember me as well." He reached out and tapped the ball with one finger, sending it rolling toward the child's hands. Matteo grabbed at it, missed, giggled. "Again," Sophia said. "He will not grow bored of this soon." They played like that for a few minutes. The scene was simple, almost ordinary, yet for Sophia, every second felt strangely fragile, as if one sharp sound could shatter it. Lorenzo watched her as much as he watched the child. "You are patient," he said at one point. "It is the only way with babies," she replied. "They do not bend to hurry, nor do some counts," he said lightly. She glanced at him, surprised by the jest. "I would not know, Excellency. I have met only one. And what do you make of him?" he asked, too casually. She looked down quickly. "He loves his son. He carries more weight than a single man should. Sometimes he forgets to eat." He blinked. "Do I?" "Yes," she said. "The kitchen girls tell me they take plates away untouched." He made a faint sound, half amused, half something else. "The house talks too much," he said. "Even about my appetite. It worries," she said. "We all do, in our own way." She realized she had said "we" too late. Heat rose in her cheeks. Lorenzo's expression softened. "And you?" he asked quietly. "What worries you, Sophia Ricci?" She stiffened. "Only my duties, Excellency. That I do not drop the child, that he does not take ill." He did not push. "Those are enough," he said. He left soon after, called away by some matter. The room felt a little emptier when the door closed. Hints of another life slipped in around the edges. Drawers with account books carried up to the nursery when Lorenzo refused to be away from his son. Snatches of conversation about rents and harvests. Names of villages, names of men. Sometimes one would catch at Sophia's ear and make her hands still. Once, as Lorenzo murmured to the major domo over a list, she heard him say, "We must review the older contracts from the years after my father's illness." There were disputes then, some families left the land. Her chest prickled. She recognized the years. They matched the time her own father's face had changed, the time dinners had grown thinner. "Ricci," she heard the major domo say reluctantly. There was trouble with the Riccis. Her heart thudded so loudly she feared they would hear it. "Yes," Lorenzo said slowly. "I remember the name. My father said the steward had mismanaged funds." Her fingers tightened around Matteo's blanket. She kept her eyes on the child and her mouth closed. "Perhaps," the majordomo ventured, "we should not stir old matters now. There is enough strain." "Perhaps," Lorenzo said. The paper rustled. The subject moved on. The name hung in the air anyway. Later that night, alone in the small servants' room, Sophia turned her father's old handkerchief over and over between her fingers, tracing the faint initials stitched in the corner. "Not yet," she whispered to the cloth. "I cannot tell them yet. I do not know what it would break." The days continued to fold and unfold. Then Countess Vittoria decided the household needed fresh company. "It is not healthy," she said one morning over coffee with Lorenzo, "for you to close yourself in with ledgers and a crying child. You must see people. You must remember your duties beyond this palazzo." "My duties are here," he said. "Your duties are also to the future of this family," she replied. "Our lands, our alliances, our name. You cannot cling forever to a memory and a cradle. The boy will need a mother. You will need a partner who understands our world." He stared into his cup. "You have already chosen one, I suppose." "I have considered possibilities," Vittoria said. "There is the Rinaldi family. You remember Alessandro? Solid lands, respectable connections. His cousin Elena is a refined young woman. She is not a girl. She knows how to manage a household." "I recall Alessandro's fondness for cards," Lorenzo said dryly. "He has matured," she replied quickly. "Besides, his cousin is the point. She would bring grace back to this house. You cannot spend the rest of your days talking to nurses and maids." His eyes flickered. "You disapprove of my talking to maids?" "I disapprove of your dependence on one," she said plainly. "It is not appropriate for a man in your position. People notice. They talk." He set his cup down. "Let them talk." "They will do more than talk if you are not careful," she said keenly. "They will judge, they will withdraw. You cannot afford that. Invite Alessandro. Let us have some civilized company. You will see Elena. You will remember that life is not confined to the nursery." He did not promise, but he did not refuse. That was enough for Vittoria. Within a week, Signor Alessandro Rinaldi and his cousin Elena arrived. The house prepared itself like a body straightening before a dance. Floors were swept twice, candles polished. Wine brought up from the cool cellar. Sophia saw them first from the top of the servants' stairs, just a glimpse into the great hall. Alessandro was tall, with the easy smile of a man used to being welcome. His clothes were just shy of ostentatious, his hair perfectly arranged. He bowed over Vittoria's hand with practiced charm. Elena stood beside him, pale and composed. She moved with quiet grace, her light-colored dress modest but perfectly cut. Her eyes were watchful. "The house is as grand as ever," Alessandro said, "though quieter." "We have known sorrow," Vittoria replied. "We seek now a different kind of sound." Her gaze flicked upward, toward the corridor that led to the nursery. Later that afternoon, Lorenzo brought Matteo down briefly to greet the guests. The child, in a simple gown, looked around with wary interest. Alessandro laughed. "There is the heir. He bears the Bianchi stare already." Elena smiled gently. "He is beautiful. May I?" She extended her arms for the baby. Lorenzo hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." The nanny placed Matteo carefully in her embrace. Elena held him correctly with a woman's practiced ease. She spoke to him softly, admiring his fingers, his hair. For a minute, he studied her face. Then he frowned, his body stiffened. A small sound escaped him. Not a cry yet, just a warning. Elena adjusted her hold. "Hush," she said. "You do not know me yet. You will." The small sound grew. His mouth crumpled. "Here we go," Alessandro murmured, amused. The nanny stepped forward. "Perhaps we should—" "Let us see," Vittoria said, watching closely. Matteo began to cry in earnest. His hands pushed against Elena's bodice, his head turning away. He looked toward the door, toward the stairs. "He does not like unfamiliar faces," the nanny said quickly. "He is used to his own routine." "He must learn new routines," Vittoria replied. The cries sharpened. "I think he is more distressed than amused," Elena said, a faint line between her brows. "Someone he knows should take him." The nanny took him back. He did not calm. He arched, seeking. From the shadows near the corridor, Sophia watched. Her hands twisted in her apron. She had been told not to come forward unless called. She had been pointedly kept upstairs as the guests arrived. Now the sound of his crying pulled at her skin. Lorenzo's eyes lifted. For a second, they met hers across the hall. He gave the smallest nod. The nanny caught it. "Call the maid," she said wearily. Vittoria's lips thinned. Sophia stepped out of the shadows and came down the last steps. "The miracle nurse," Alessandro said lightly. "We have heard of you already." Sophia kept her gaze low. "Good afternoon, Excellency." "My lord." "My lady." "Take him," Lorenzo said. She did. The house watched. As always, Matteo's cries faltered, then faded. He pressed his face against her shoulder, seeking the scent and sound he knew. Within moments, he quieted. The silence that followed was thick. Alessandro let out a low whistle. "Remarkable." "Children cling to what they know," Elena said, though she looked impressed despite herself. Vittoria smiled thinly. "Our young maid has discovered a very effective way to make herself indispensable." Sophia felt the words like a draft under the door. "I only hold him when he cries," she said quietly. "Exactly," Vittoria replied. "You arrive when he is most distressed, rescue him, and become his only comfort. A clever pattern." "Are you suggesting she makes him cry?" Lorenzo asked, his voice cool. "Of course not," Vittoria said. "Only that she may not be as passive as she appears. People cling to usefulness. It is natural. Some learn very young how to secure it." Alessandro watched Sophia with interest. "Do you, Signorina? Do you know how to secure a place in the world?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I only know how to hold a child." "An honest answer," Elena murmured. They moved on to other topics, but the remark lingered. It grew teeth in the servants' hall. "She makes herself indispensable," Rosa said later, kneading dough with unnecessary force. "The Count cannot move without her in the nursery. That is not natural. She must encourage it." "How?" one girl asked. "She cannot climb into his crib at night." "Children smell things," another said. "If she smells of ambition, he will not let go." They laughed, but the laughter had an edge. It grew sharper after a small incident a few days later. The nanny, stung by Vittoria's hints, tried again to manage without Sophia. She took Matteo for a walk in the corridor. He grew restless. A visiting maid offered to hold him for a moment. He refused, cried, reached. "Do not you dare call her," the nanny muttered, bouncing him. "We will do without her at least once." The more she bounced, the more he cried. A door opened down the corridor. Alessandro stepped out, adjusting his cuffs. "What is this?" he asked, half amused, half annoyed. "A concert?" "He is overtired," the nanny said, flushed. "He will settle." He watched for a moment, then tilted his head. "It is curious," he said. "He cries more when she is not here. That is power, is it not? To be the only one who brings calm." The nanny bristled. "She has no power. She is a maid. Power does not care for titles," Alessandro said, "only for effects." By the time this observation reached Vittoria's ears, it had grown. "She is manipulating the house," someone told her. "Even Signor Rinaldi says so." Vittoria did not need much more. She waited for her moment, and took it one grey afternoon when the air itself seemed tired. She went straight to the nursery. Sophia was there alone with Matteo, humming as she folded clean linen. The child lay on a blanket, kicking at the air, making small delighted sounds as he grabbed for his toes. "Leave us," Vittoria said from the doorway. Sophia straightened so quickly the linen slipped from her hands. "Your ladyship." "Leave us," Vittoria repeated. "I wish to speak with my great-nephew alone." Sophia hesitated. "He may cry, your ladyship." "Then he will learn that not every cry brings you," Vittoria said coolly. "Go." Sophia looked at Matteo. He blinked up at her, unconcerned. "Yes, your ladyship," she whispered. She slipped out, closing the door softly. She stayed in the corridor, though, within earshot. She could not make herself go far. Inside, Vittoria stooped with more grace than her years suggested. "Look at you," she said to Matteo. "Staring as if you understood. Do you? Do you understand how much trouble your tastes cause?" He gurgled at her, kicking his legs. She lifted him, awkward but determined. "You are a Bianchi," she said. "Your comfort does not come from kitchen girls. You will learn." He frowned. His lower lip trembled. She bounced him, walked him, whispered to him. It did not work. Within minutes he was crying, pushing away from her shoulder. From the corridor, Sophia flinched at each cry. "Enough," Vittoria said sharply. "You will stop this. You hear me, boy? You will not rule this house with your noise." Her voice turned softer, coaxing, but the note of frustration was there. The door opened suddenly. Lorenzo stood there, having come at the sound. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Teaching him," she said. that he cannot have everything his way as if he were king. He is crying, Lorenzo said. He cries too easily, she replied, because you and that girl rush to him at every whimper. This is your doing, Lorenzo. You lean on her as much as he does. It is unseemly. Sophia stood frozen against the wall, unable to step forward or away. This is not about the girl, he said. It is entirely about her, Vittoria answered. The servants whisper. The guests notice. Even Rinaldi commented on her influence. Alessandro appeared at the far end of the corridor, drawn by the raised voices. He approached with careful speed. Have I come at a bad time? He asked lightly. It depends whether you enjoy a spectacle, Vittoria said. Matteo's cries rose higher. He is distressed, Alessandro observed. Perhaps the maid should... No, Vittoria snapped. We will see what happens if, for once, she does not appear at once. She is already here, Lorenzo said tightly, glancing toward the hall. All eyes turned. Sophia wished the floor would open. Alessandro's gaze ran over her, thoughtful. Ah, he said. There she is. The house's smallest pillar. Vittoria straightened. You see how it is, Alessandro. One sound from the child and she appears like a spirit. One word from the Count, and she is granted unusual freedoms. It is a dangerous habit. It is unusual, he agreed, though I cannot fault a father for wanting peace for his son. The peace comes through her, Vittoria said. That is the point. She has become a gate the whole house must pass to reach the boy's calm. It is an unhealthy dependency. For all of them. She turned on Sophia. Did you intend this girl? She asked. Did you plan to become indispensable? Sophia's throat worked. No, your ladyship. You only came when he cried. Vittoria cut in. You only took every chance to insert yourself. You only allowed the child to believe that no other arms would do. I did not allow or forbid, Sophia said, keeping her voice as steady as she could. He chose. Babies choose. They choose what they are offered, Vittoria said sharply. I think I do not see the little tricks. The way you hover in the corridor, waiting for someone to say, call her. The way you keep your eyes lowered, as if you do not hear every word spoken about you. Sophia's hands shook. I stay near because he cries, she said. If I were in the kitchen, I would still hear him. It is worse to hear and do nothing. And so you have made yourself his savior, Vittoria said. A role very comfortable for the ego. That is enough, Lorenzo said, his voice low. No, it is not, Vittoria replied. You refuse to see it, so I will say it plainly, before the whole house says it behind your back. This girl has entangled herself in this family's most sensitive place. She holds the child and through him holds you. It is not proper, it is not safe. For your reputation. For his future. She stepped closer to Sophia. Tell me, she said coldly. When you came here from your little village, did you imagine this? Did you dream of being at the center of the house? Of making the Count look at you every day? The words struck where they were aimed. Sophia's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. No, your ladyship, she said. I dreamed only of wages. Lies, Vittoria hissed. You may fool him with your humility. You do not fool me. You peasants are not as simple as you pretend. You smell opportunity and cling to it. Alessandro raised his hand slightly. My dear lady. Do you disagree? She demanded. He glanced between them. I think the attachment is unusual. People might misunderstand. That is all. You see? Vittoria said triumphantly to Lorenzo. Even he says so. Lorenzo's face was hard. What would you have me do? He asked. Tear my son from the one person who soothes him to satisfy some notion of decorum? To prevent a scandal, she said. To prevent this girl from gaining more hold than she already has. You brought her to the nursery. You can send her away now with appropriate kindness and a reference. The child will cry for a few days, then he will accept his nurse. Children forget. The word knifed through Sophia. She looked at Lorenzo. He was silent. Excellency, she whispered. If you wish me to go, I will go. I do not want to be a burden. I did not come here to shame you. Matteo cried in Vittoria's arms, red-faced and frantic. Lorenzo's jaw muscle jumped. My son, he began. Will survive, Vittoria said firmly. He must. He is a Bianchi. Alessandro watched with narrowed eyes, waiting to see which way the decision would fall. The corridor seemed to shrink. The air thickened. Lorenzo closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them, something had settled in his expression. A choice. "You will receive your wages to the end of the month," he said to Sophia, his voice formal. "The major domo will provide a letter of good conduct. You may seek employment elsewhere. The house thanks you for what you have done for my son." The words felt like a blow from an unseen hand. Sophia's breath left her. "Yes, Excellency," she said quietly. She did not trust herself to say more. She turned and walked away before the tears could climb to her eyes. No one stopped her. Back in the servants' quarters, the news arrived before she did. "She is dismissed," a scullery boy whispered. "Sent away like a stray cat after all." "Who will the baby cry for now?" a maid asked. "He will cry for no one," Rosa snapped. "He will learn. We all do." Sophia entered the small room and closed the door behind her. The bundle on the bed waited, still tied from the night she had almost left. She sat down heavily. Her hands felt numb as she added her few extra things: a spare apron, the piece of bread she had saved, the handkerchief with her father's faint initials. The noise of the house blurred around her ears, snatches of conversation, clatter of dishes, distant footsteps. It all blended into a dull hum. Only one sound could cut through it now. As she tied the bundle closed, it came, not thin, not tentative, but full and fierce, as if his small body was pouring out every scrap of air it held. Matteo's cry. It rose through the floors, through the doors, through the walls, and wrapped around her like a rope. Her hands stilled on the knot. The cry did not stop. It climbed higher, jagged and hoarse, as if he had been crying for some time already. Other sounds joined it. A nurse's flustered shushing, the majordomo's anxious murmur. Then, faint but clear, another voice, roughened in a way she had never heard before. Lorenzo's voice calling down the corridor, unguarded and desperate. "Someone fetch Sophia. He will not calm without her." The words seemed to hang in the air of the little room. "Someone fetch Sophia. He will not calm without her." For a moment Sophia wondered if she had imagined them. She sat very still on the narrow bed, fingers clenched around the bundle. Then the cry rose again, jagged and hoarse, and with it came hurried footsteps in the corridor. The door burst open. A kitchen boy stood there, panting. "Sophia, the Count says—" "I heard," she said. She set the bundle down. Her hands shook despite her effort to keep them steady. "I was dismissed," she added, more to herself than to him. The boy swallowed. "He says to come anyway. The baby will not stop. The nurse has tried everything. Signor Carlo went to him twice, and the Count shook him off and shouted that they must bring you." Sophia closed her eyes briefly. "This will not help anyone," she murmured, but she rose. The boy darted ahead of her as she followed, her skirt whispering against the stone. The cries grew louder with every step. They sounded raw now, the sounds of a small voice pushed beyond its strength. The corridor outside the nursery was full. The nanny looked near tears. The majordomo's composure had cracked. Even Eleanor stood uncertainly by the wall, her hands clasped, her calm shaken. Inside the nursery, Lorenzo paced, his face drawn, his hair slightly disordered. In his arms, Matteo screamed until his little body shook. The baby's face was mottled red, his breath catching. Each sob sounded thinner, more ragged. Lorenzo turned when Sophia appeared. Something like relief flashed across his eyes, then guilt, then simple, stark desperation. "Take him," he said hoarsely. "Please." There were no formalities left in his voice. The nanny opened her mouth to protest, then closed it when she saw the child's state. Sophia stepped forward, her own heart pounding. "Give him to me," she said softly. Lorenzo handed Matteo over as if he were surrendering his last defenses. The baby's fists beat against her shoulder at first. His cries went on. She tightened her hold, tucking his head under her chin, feeling the hot dampness of his tears. "Shh," she whispered, finding the rhythm that had become second nature. "I am here. It is all right to be angry. But breathe, little one, breathe." She began to sway, slow and steady. The cries did not stop at once. His throat was too raw for miracles. But they changed. The sharp edge dulled. The breaks between sobs lengthened. "You will make yourself ill," she murmured into his hair. "Then you will be cross with me tomorrow for letting it happen." His small hand grabbed at her dress. His face burrowed closer. He sobbed a few more times, each weaker than the last. The room watched. Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth. The nanny wiped at her eyes. The majordomo stared at the floor, ashamed of his earlier relief at her dismissal. Lorenzo stood very still, as if afraid to move and disturb the fragile calm returning to the room. After several minutes, Matteo's breathing slowed. Hiccuping whimpers gave way to small, shuddering sighs. His eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. "He has worn himself out," Sophia said quietly. "He needs rest now, and water later. His throat must hurt." She continued to rock him until his weight grew slack in her arms. "Can you lay him down?" Lorenzo asked, his voice softer. "If I move too quickly, he will wake," she said. "But he cannot sleep upright like this all night either." She shifted carefully toward the cradle. This time, when she lowered him, his body stirred only a little. His face twisted. A faint sound escaped him. But when her hand came to rest on his chest, he settled again. She kept her palm there until the little muscles of his cheek relaxed completely. The room exhaled with him. There was a moment of pure, deep quiet. Then Vittoria's voice cut through it from the doorway. "Well," she said, "your experiment in discipline seems to have failed." Everyone turned. She stood framed in the doorway, her shawl pulled tight, her face pale with a mixture of worry, anger, and something like fear. "You nearly broke his voice," she said to Lorenzo. "To prove what? That you can force a child to forget the arms he trusts?" Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "This is not the time," he said. "It is exactly the time," she replied. "Look at him. Look at her." Her gaze flicked to Sophia, who still stood by the cradle, one hand resting on the rail as if she could hold the child's sleep in place. "She was packed to leave," Vittoria said. "And yet, here we are again, the entire house dependent on her presence." "It is not her fault," Lorenzo said. "It is mine." "Yes," Vittoria answered, "and mine for letting it go so far. This is absurd, Lorenzo. You cannot run a great house at the mercy of a maid." "The great house seems very small when my son cannot breathe for crying," he said sharply. "I will not discuss this in front of him." "He is asleep," she said. "He will not be harmed by truth." "Enough, your ladyship," the nanny whispered. He truly might have made himself ill. We could do nothing." Vittoria's gaze softened for a second, as it rested on the baby's limp hand. "I do not wish him harm," she said, "but I wish also to protect him from a different kind of harm." Her eyes returned to Sophia. "You may all leave us," she said to the others. "Not you, girl, stay." Elena glanced at Lorenzo. "I think perhaps," Elena began. "Please," Lorenzo cut in. "Let them all stay, or let us all go. I have no strength left for separate counsels." Vittoria gave him a long look, then sighed. "Very well," she said. "We will all stand and watch the play together." She walked further into the room. "You said it yourself," she told Lorenzo. "You should not have dismissed her in anger and embarrassment, but you did. And you were not wrong to think that her presence complicates matters. Look around. Do you not see the way people look at you? At them." He looked at Sophia, at his son, at the watching faces. "I see," he said. "I see that I put my fear of whispering above my son's need, and I was wrong. And yet you must think beyond today," she insisted. "Will you keep her here forever? Will you let him cling to her when he is 5, 10, grown?" "Children grow out of arms," Sophia said quietly. "They run away and do not look back. I have seen it in my village. They do not cling forever." "Until they do," Vittoria murmured. "In some other way." She stepped closer to Sophia. "You should not have returned," she said. "You should have taken your bundle and walked away when you had the chance." "I tried," Sophia said simply. "I heard him." "That is exactly the problem," Vittoria replied. "You let his needs rule you, and now you rule us through him." Sophia flinched. "I do not rule anyone," she said. "I have no wish to rule." "Then why do you stand there as if the cradle belongs to you?" Vittoria demanded. "Why do you accept his arms as if they were your right?" "He reaches for me," Sophia said, her voice low but steady. "I do not reach for him." "Enough," Lorenzo said again. "You have made your point. We all know what people say, that I am weak, that I let a child and a servant dictate my household, that grief has turned me foolish, but none of those tongues fed him tonight. None of them carried him while he screamed. Do not turn this into a simple matter of pity, Vittoria said. I am trying to protect you. By wounding the one person who has harmed no one, he countered. You say that because you know nothing about her, Vittoria shot back. She arrived here out of nowhere. Do you know her people? Her history? You know only that your son stops crying when she sings. Is that enough to place all your trust, to risk talk of other entanglements? The last words hung, pointed, ugly. The room went very still. Lorenzo flushed with anger. Careful, he said softly. You are speaking of a woman under my roof. I'm speaking of danger, she replied. When a man in your position spends his days in the company of a young woman of no position, the world will assume what it always assumes. You may not see it, but I do. I will not pretend blindness because it comforts you. Sophia felt cold spread through her. She wanted to disappear into the floor. I have done nothing, she whispered. I believe you, Elena said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. She stepped forward, calm but firm. I have watched you with the child, she told Sophia. I have watched the way you move when his father enters. You do not preen, you do not flirt, you do not seek eyes, you seek only the child's comfort. Whatever else is said, that is truth. Vittoria stared at her niece. You are very confident in your judgment after a week. I am observant, Elena replied, and I am not afraid to say when I disagree. She turned to Lorenzo. I think your aunt is right about one thing, she said. People will speak, they already do. But I think she is wrong about another. The answer is not to throw this girl out like trash. That will not silence tongues. It will sharpen them. What then do you suggest? Vittoria asked tightly. Elena looked at him. That you decide what she is to you, and treat her accordingly. Not as a secret, not as a convenience, as something you are prepared to defend. Her words landed heavier than the others. Lorenzo's eyes met Sophia's. What is she to you? Vittoria demanded. A nurse? Then give her proper status, train her, protect her, but keep your distance. A charity, then support her family and let her go. Or something else you dare not name. His gaze did not move. He seemed suddenly tired in a deeper way. You ask as if I have been playing a game, he said. I have not. I have been trying to keep my son alive and my house upright, both at once. You cannot keep both if you do not decide, Vittoria said. Silence stretched. Matteo shifted in his sleep, making a small sound. Sophia spoke first. I will make the decision easier, she said quietly. I will leave in the morning. You need not pay me more than is due. I will go back to San Giusto. My sister's husband can find me work. The child will learn to be comforted by another voice. No, Lorenzo said at once. Excellency, no, he repeated. Not like this. Not while I still owe you. More than wages. She shook her head. You owe me nothing. I owe you the truth, he said. And you owe me yours. He turned to his aunt. Leave us, he said. She looked as if she would refuse, but Elena touched her arm. Come, Zia, she murmured. We are doing more harm than good. Let them speak. There is a child in this room. We should think of him as well. Reluctantly, Vittoria allowed herself to be led out. Alessandro followed, eyebrows raised, clearly curious but wise enough not to linger. The nanny and majordomo hesitated. You may go too, Lorenzo told them. Stay within call, but go. They slipped out, closing the door quietly. The nursery shrank to 3 people, and the soft sound of a sleeping baby. For a long moment, no one spoke. Sophia stared at the cradle rail. Her fingers had gone white around it. You said I owe you the truth, she said at last. I have not lied to you, Excellency. You have hidden something, he answered. I know the sound a name makes when it lands. Yours has touched nerves since the moment you spoke it. Her hand tightened. My name is only a name. Ricci of San Giusto is not only a name in this house, he said. I remember it. My father spoke it when I was a boy. Carlo, the majordomo, flinched when he wrote it in his book. You stiffen every time you hear this estate mentioned. There is more between your family and mine than shared soil. She swallowed. There was more once. Tell me, he said. I am asking not as your employer, but as the man whose child you soothe at night. I cannot protect what I do not understand. She lifted her gaze slowly. He looked tired, but he also looked open. If I tell you, she warned, you will send me away anyway. You may even wish you had never called me back tonight. Let me decide that after I know, he replied. She took a breath. My father, she began, was named Giulio Ricci. He was steward on Bianchi lands before I was born. My earliest memories are of him coming home with dust on his boots and a kind of light in his face when he spoke of the fields. He said he served a good house, that he was proud to keep its accounts honest. Lorenzo's eyes sharpened. Giulio, he repeated softly. She nodded. Then when I was 8, he came home one evening different, she said. His shoulders were bent. His face was not my father's. He sat down at the table and told my mother he had been dismissed, accused of mismanaging funds, of taking what was not his. Her voice stayed level, but her hand on the cradle shook. He denied it, she continued. He swore he had never taken a coin. But the accusation came from the palazzo, from the count at the time, your father. Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly. I remember whispers, he murmured. A discrepancy in the ledgers. My father ill and angry, my uncle the lawyer. But I was young. They spoke over my head. They did not speak over ours, Sophia said. In the village they spoke clearly. The steward is a thief, they said. Do not trust a Ricci with your grain. Do not trust him with your daughter's dowries. Doors closed, work vanished. My father tried to find another position, but no one wanted the steward who had crossed the Bianchis. She paused. He became quieter, she said. He did what work he could. He grew thinner. He stopped whistling in the fields. One winter he took ill and did not recover. My mother says it was his lungs. I think his heart broke first. She pressed the heel of her hand to her eyes for a moment. After he died, she said, we sold what little we had left. My sister married quickly. My mother moved into their house. I went to the town for work, and all the while the name Bianchi sat in my chest like a stone. Lorenzo listened in silence, his face slowly changing. When I heard there was a position in the palazzo, she went on, I did not want to come. I told myself I would never set foot on these floors. But my mother's cough grew worse. My sister's husband's wages were small. I could not afford pride, so I came. I hoped my name would pass unnoticed. It almost did. She gave a small, humorless smile. Until your aunt asked me where I was from, she said, and until your son decided that out of all the arms in this house, he wanted mine. The room felt very still. Lorenzo moved closer to the cradle and laid his hand beside hers on the rail. You believe my father wronged yours, he said. I do not know, she answered. I was 8. I know only that my father swore his innocence, and that your father's word weighed more in the world than his. I know that we paid the price. Perhaps your father saw something we did not. Perhaps my father did make some mistake, but the punishment, the shame, it was more than any man should bear for an error in a book. Her voice shivered on the last word. Lorenzo stared at the sleeping child. I cannot ask my father what he did, he said quietly. He is gone. I cannot ask your father either. He is gone as well. But I can ask the papers, and the men who were there. And Carlo. He will say nothing, she said. He looked away when he wrote my name. Sometimes silence hides guilt, Lorenzo said. Sometimes fear. Sometimes shame. I will find out which it is. She shook her head. You do not need to trouble yourself. I do, he replied, because if we wronged your father, we wronged you. And I have been blind to it, asking you to tend my child in the same house that broke your family. He turned to face her fully. Is that why you never protested when my aunt spoke sharply? He asked. When the guests laughed? When I dismissed you like a tired servant to be replaced? Who would have listened? She said. A Ricci against a Bianchi, a maid against a count? It would have sounded like complaint, like ingratitude. I thought it better to keep my head down and do what I came to do, earn wages, send money home, and leave as quietly as I arrived. And yet, when he cried, you came, he said softly. She looked at the child. I could not help it. He does not know about ledgers and accusations. He knows only who holds him when he cannot breathe. He watched her face. Do you hate us? He asked. The question was raw. She thought for a long moment. I thought I did, she said. When I saw the crest on the gates, I wanted to turn away. When your aunt laughed at my village, I felt something harden in me. But then your son smiled at me as if the world began and ended at my hands, and hate is heavy, Excellency. It weighs more than some hearts can carry. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You have carried enough, he said. More than enough. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke again, more slowly. You said if you told me this, I would send you away, he said. Perhaps I should. Perhaps the proper thing would be to press a bag of coins into your hand, restore your family's name, and never see you again. It would be neater, cleaner. But I find I cannot imagine this house without you now. She stiffened. Because of the child, because of you, he said. She looked at him, startled. He did not look away. At first I saw only what everyone saw, he said. A maid who could calm my son when no one else could. A pair of sure hands, a quiet voice. I thought it an accident, a passing phase. But days went by and I watched. He gave a small, rueful smile. I watched you sleep in that chair because you were afraid to move him, he said. I watched you forget to eat because he had colic. I watched you stand your ground with nurses and bow your head to my aunt. I watched you glower at the ball when he rolled it away and laughed, then laugh yourself because you could not hold back. And somewhere in all of that, between one breath and the next, the house did not feel empty anymore. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. You must not say such things, she whispered. Your aunt is right, people will speak, they already do. Let them, he said. For once I find I do not care as much as I thought. I have lived these past months half as a ghost. I sit in rooms and hear my own voice and feel nothing in it. Then I come here and hear you scolding him for chewing on your braid, and I feel alive. I did not expect that. I did not plan it. But I will not pretend it is not true. She stared at him, at the lines grief had carved near his mouth, at the faint, stubborn hope in his eyes. This is madness, she breathed. Perhaps, he said, or perhaps it is the first sane thing I have felt since my wife died. She flinched at the mention of the Countess, but he went on. I will not dishonor her by pretending she did not exist, he said. She did. I loved her. She gave me this child and left me with a wound I thought would never close. But wounds do not close because we guard them. They close because we dare to move again, to risk being hurt again, to love again. She swallowed hard. You speak as if it were already decided. It is not, he said. You have not answered. You may never answer the way I wish, but I will speak plainly, as Eleanor urged. I intend to restore your father's name, if truth allows it. I intend to see that your mother and sister lack for nothing again. And if you can find it in your heart to forgive this house, I would ask you to stay. Not as a maid, not as a nurse, as the woman I hope in time to call my wife. The nursery seemed to tilt around her. She gripped the cradle to steady herself. Excellency, she whispered, do not say that. You will regret it. Your aunt will never accept it. Your peers will laugh. They already do. Let them, he repeated. You say that now, she said, but when they close their doors, when they whisper that the Bianchi house has fallen so low that its count weds a steward's daughter, then we will build different doors, he said quietly. I am tired of a world that demands sacrifice only from those who have least to give. She laughed once, shaky. You make it sound easy. It will not be, he said. I know that. There will be cold shoulders and sharp words and old laws to wrestle. I do not ask you to pretend otherwise. I ask only this. Do you feel nothing for me? Her voice caught. No, she said. I do not feel nothing. He stepped a little closer. What, then? He asked softly. She looked at him, and for a moment allowed the truth to sit naked between them. I feel, she shook her head, searching for the simplest words. I feel less alone when you walk into this room, even when you are silent. I feel seen when you ask if I have eaten. I feel angry with you and grateful to you and something else that frightens me, because it could swallow my whole life if I let it. His eyes warmed. That is enough, he said, for now. She shook her head. It is not enough to stand against your aunt, or this house. It is not your task to stand against them alone, he replied. If I choose you, then it is my task to stand beside you, or ahead of you, if needed. Silence settled again, but it felt different now, full, not empty. Matteo stirred, sucking in his sleep. His hand brushed against the rails, seeking. Sophia instinctively reached down. Her fingers closed around his tiny fist. He calmed again, still sleeping, his hand curled around hers. Lorenzo looked at their joined hands, the baby's, hers, his, resting on the rail beside them. "We are already bound," he said quietly. "The three of us. The only question is whether we admit it and honor it, or spend our lives pretending we do not feel what we feel." She watched the rise and fall of Matteo's chest. "If you truly mean to look into what was done to my father," she said slowly, "if you truly mean to stand against your own name if it proves wrong, then I will stay, for now, for him." She nodded toward the child. "And for you," she added, so softly he almost did not hear. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the words. "Thank you," he said simply. "Do not thank me yet," she replied. "You may curse me when your aunt moves her things to another wing." He laughed, the sound short but real. "She may," he said. "She may also forgive in time. She has a sharper tongue than heart." "I am not certain," Sophia murmured. "Nor am I," he admitted. "But I know this. Tomorrow I will ask Carlo for the old ledgers. I will speak with the lawyer who handled those years. I will not stop until I know what truly happened. Not only for you, for me. I have been living in a house built on stories I did not question. It is time I asked whether the stone under my feet is sound." She nodded slowly. "If you do that, whatever the truth, I will accept it." "And if the truth shows my father wrong?" he asked. "Then perhaps some weight will lift from both our names," she said, "Bianchi and Ricci together." A faint, fragile smile touched her lips. He looked at her as if he had never really seen her before. "You are braver than I," he said. "No," she answered. "I am simply tired of carrying anger. It is heavy." He studied her, then carefully reached for her free hand. "May I?" he asked. She hesitated, then let her fingers rest in his. His palm was warm, calloused from riding and sword practice years ago, from work he did now with ledgers and reins. Their hands fit oddly well, a little awkward, a little right. They stood like that in the dim nursery. The Count, the maid, the sleeping child, joined by small human points of contact. Outside, the house murmured on. Servants clearing dishes, distant doors closing, someone laughing too loudly in the servants' hall to hide unease. Inside, the room held a different sound, the soft, even breathing of a baby, the almost inaudible sigh of a woman who had finally spoken her buried truth, the quiet resolve of a man who had, at last, chosen a path that was his own. Lorenzo bent his head slightly. "Whatever comes," he said, "we will meet it together. Do you agree?" Sophia looked at their joined hands, then at the child, then at him. "Yes," she said. "Together." For the first time in many months, the night around the palazzo did not feel quite so cold. Spring came quietly to the palazzo. It crept in with softer air at the windows, with birds waking earlier, with the feel of damp earth when the servants walked the grounds. Inside, life still turned around ledgers and schedules and nursery bells, but something had shifted. Lorenzo spent more time in the old study, not just with current accounts, but with boxes that had not been opened in years. Dust rose when he lifted the lids. Papers crinkled under his hands. Carlo, the major domo, stood nearby, nervous. "You are certain you wish to go through all of these, Excellency?" he asked. "They are from a complicated period." "That is precisely why," Lorenzo said. "Bring me the ledgers from the years before my father's illness, and the ones after, and the correspondence with Signor Bartoli." Carlo hesitated. "Signor Bartoli is no longer our lawyer, Excellency. In part, I suspect, because of these years," Lorenzo said. "Bring them." The hours passed. Sums were checked, names read, letters unfolded. Here was the steward's neat writing, balancing columns. Here were notes from the lawyer, compressed and precise. Here were comments in his father's bold hand, sometimes clear, sometimes wandering as illness crept in. And here, finally, a letter that made Lorenzo's hand still. He read it once, twice. Then he called Carlo closer. "Read that," he said. Carlo obeyed. His face went pale. "It is not, as we were told," he murmured. "No," Lorenzo said quietly. "It is not." The letter, in Bartoli's cramped script, laid it out plainly. A discrepancy had been found. Funds missing. Suspicion had fallen first on another man, a minor clerk with friends in the city. There had been talk of prosecution, of scandal. Then another plan had been suggested. A steward with no powerful family, a man of quiet reputation. A name that would cause less uproar if attached to disgrace. He suggested we simplify matters, the letter read. The steward is responsible for the accounts, after all. The public will accept such a story. The other fellow's relatives would make trouble if we pursued him, whereas the steward's cannot. At the bottom, in his father's fading hand, was a line. If it spares the family, it must be done. Lorenzo closed the letter slowly. So, he said, we spared the family by breaking an innocent man. Carlo swallowed hard. Your father was not himself, Excellency. He listened to the loudest voice. He thought of the estate. The times were difficult. Difficult for whom? Lorenzo asked. We lost money. We tightened belts. But the Riccis lost their name. He went through more letters. Another note from Bartoli, boasting quietly of his solution. A mention of that Ricci fellow, spoken of as a problem neatly solved. By the time he pushed the last paper aside, his jaw ached from holding it tight. He leaned back in the chair and covered his face with his hands. Excellency, Carlo said, hesitant. What will you do? Lorenzo lowered his hands. His eyes were bright, but not with tears. With anger. What I should have done years ago, he said. Tell the truth. That evening, he knocked at the nursery door. Sophia sat on the floor, a string of wooden beads looped between her fingers. Matteo crawled toward them, making determined noises, cheeks flushed with effort. Look at you, she laughed. Soon you will be running, and I will be chasing you down the corridors like a village dog after a cart. The baby looked up and grinned at the sound of her voice. Then he saw Lorenzo and let out a delighted squeal. Sophia turned. Her smile faded a little when she saw his face. What is it? She asked softly. He came in and closed the door. Carlo, he said, take your supper. We will watch him. The majordomo nodded and slipped out. Lorenzo sank into the chair by the window. For a moment he watched them in silence. Sophia stood and dusted her skirt. You found something, she said. I can tell. Yes, he answered. Sit, please. She obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair opposite him. Matteo crawled determinedly to her knee and pulled himself up, leaning against her leg. Her hand dropped without thinking to steady him. I went through the old papers, Lorenzo said. The ledgers, the letters. Carlo helped me. The story we were told, and the truth, are not the same. She kept her eyes on his face, braced. Tell me plainly, she said. He did not soften it. Your father did not steal from this house, he said. The missing funds were taken by another clerk who had relatives in important offices. The lawyer convinced my father that it would be easier to blame the steward. He wrote that the public would accept such a story, that no one would make trouble on behalf of a man with no power. Sophia's fingers curled into Matteo's shirt. So they chose him, she said, because he could not defend himself. Yes, Lorenzo said. My father signed his name to it. Sick, afraid for the estate, listening to a lawyer who spoke of sacrifice and duty. But the fact remains, your father was made the scapegoat for another man's crime. Our house did that. Her breath hitched. She looked down at Matteo's soft hair. For a long time she said nothing. I am sorry, Lorenzo said quietly. She lifted her head. For what? She asked. For something you did not do. For carrying his name and not questioning it sooner, he said. For benefiting from a lie I did not know was a lie but did not bother to examine. For asking you into the service of a house that built its comfort partly on your father's ruin. A small, sharp sound escaped her. Half laugh, half sob. You talk as if you were the only one who did not question the powerful, she said. I served in another house before this. They did not want to hear about old injustices either. No one does when the injustice benefits them. He watched her face. What do you feel? He asked. She thought about it. For years I felt anger, she said slowly, hot and clear. Then I felt tired of carrying it. Now, she shook her head. Now I feel sad for my father, for your father, for the way fear can make people strike the wrong head. Matteo thumped his hand against her knee, trying to get their attention. She scooped him onto her lap, kissed his temple, then held him close. What will you do? She asked. Not what they did, he said. I will not hide this. I plan to call the family together, and some of the tenants, and the servants. Anyone who has heard the name Ricci as a curse. I will tell them the truth. I will clear your father's name publicly, and I will see that your mother and sister are provided for." She stared. "You would stand in front of them all and say your own house was wrong?" she asked. "Yes," he said simply, "because it was." "And your aunt?" "She will protest," he said. "She will say we are opening old wounds. I will tell her they have never closed, and if she chooses to be angry, she may. But she will listen. She owes your family that much, at least." Tears rose slowly in Sophia's eyes. "No one ever spoke of my father that way," she whispered, "as someone owed anything. He was spoken of only as a warning." "He will be spoken of differently now," Lorenzo said. She wiped at her cheeks with the back of her hand. "What about the man who truly stole?" she asked. "Dead these many years," Lorenzo replied. "His relatives moved away. There is no one to punish, only a record to set straight." She nodded slowly. "Then set it straight," she said. "Not for me, for my father. Let his name breathe." He reached across the space between the chairs and took her free hand. "It will," he said. 2 days later, the great hall of the palazzo filled in a way it had not for a long time. Not for a ball, not for a funeral, for something stranger. Servants lined the back walls, whispering among themselves. Tenants from nearby villages stood in their work coats and best shawls, hats turning nervously in their hands. The family clustered together, Vittoria stiff in dark silk, Alessandro with a curious glint in his eyes, Elena calm and alert. Sophia stood at the edge of the gathering, near a column. She had dressed as simply as always, but Rosa had pressed her apron a little smoother that morning and smoothed her braid with more care. Matteo stayed in the nursery with the nurse. For once his cries did not fill the house. Perhaps he sensed the weight of the day. Lorenzo stepped forward to the center of the room. The murmur dimmed. "Thank you for coming," he began. His voice carried clearly. "I know you were told this was a matter of the estate. In a way it is, but not as you may think." Eyes fixed on him. He held up a folded letter. "Many years ago," he said, "when my father still ruled this house, there was an accusation. Money missing from the estate's accounts. A steward blamed. A name dragged through the mud. A ripple went through the villages. Some remembered. Some had been children then, but stories lasted. The steward's name was Giulio Ricci," Lorenzo said. "Some of you might remember him. Many of you have heard that name whispered as a warning. Do not be like Ricci. Do not trust a Ricci with your coin. Do not trade with that family. They are thieves." A few heads nodded. They turned toward one another, recalling old phrases. "Those words were based on a lie," Lorenzo said. The hall stilled. He unfolded the letter. "I have read the ledgers," he went on. "I have read the letters between my father and his lawyer. I have spoken with the men still living who were present. The truth is this. Another man stole. A clerk with ties to people who could have caused trouble. To avoid scandal, the lawyer suggested an easier target. He proposed that the steward be blamed since he had no powerful friends. My father, weakened by illness and frightened for the estate, agreed. The steward was dismissed in disgrace. No proof was presented, no chance given to defend himself, and we moved on." He let the words hang for a long moment. "I will not move on," he said. "Not now that I know. Giulio Ricci was innocent of the theft for which he was blamed. This house owes him and his family more than I can easily say. And today, before all of you, I say this. The Bianchi name was wrong. The Ricci name is cleared." A man near the back made a small noise. An old fellow with a stoop holding his cap in twisting fingers. "I worked with Giulio," he croaked. "In the fields. He said he did not do it. No one believed. Time passed. People forgot. Not me. I remembered his eyes." He wiped at his face with the back of his hand. In the front, Vittoria looked as if someone had struck her. "You would say this in front of tenants?" she whispered fiercely. "You would lower our name so?" "We lowered it when we lied," Lorenzo answered, not turning. "Today I am raising it by telling the truth." He looked out over the crowd again. "The Ricci family will receive compensation from this house," he said. "A portion of land made theirs in San Giusto. Enough that they need never beg work from anyone who doubts their honesty again. And if any among you repeats the old slur about their name after today, you will not be welcome on my lands." The last words held iron. Murmurs rose. Surprise. Approval from some. Unease from others. "Who asks this justice?" someone called, half joking, half skeptical. "The Riccis themselves?" Lorenzo shook his head. "No," he said. "Oddly enough, the one Ricci currently under my roof asked for nothing. She came to work quietly, under a name that must have felt heavy in these halls. She has done her duties without complaint. When insulted, she bowed her head. When dismissed, she packed her things. When my son cried himself nearly sick, she came anyway." 100 eyes turned toward Sophia. She wished the floor would open beneath her feet. "She is here," someone muttered. "The maid who calms him." Eleanor stepped forward, her face bright. "Come," she said gently, and held out a hand. Sophia shook her head once, then took it. Together they walked to where Lorenzo stood. Her heart thudded in her ears. "This is Sophia Ricci," Lorenzo said. "Daughter of Giulio, granddaughter of farmers who worked our soil for decades before that. She has more courage than many I have met of higher station, and more honesty than some who advised my father." A flush climbed Sophia's neck. "Excellency," she whispered. He went on. "I cannot ask her father to forgive this house," he said. "He is beyond my voice, but I can ask her." He turned to her. "In the hearing of all present," he said quietly, "I say this. Our house wronged yours. We cannot give you back your father's years, your childhood's ease, your name's clean sound. We can only admit what was done and try to do better now. Sophia Ricci, will you accept our repentance?" She looked at him, at the villagers, at the servants who stared with wide eyes. She thought of her father at the table, hands rough and still, of her mother's cough, of her sister's hushed talk with neighbors who would not quite meet her eyes. Her throat tightened. "I do not accept it for you alone," she said. "If I say yes, it is because my father cannot say it himself, and perhaps it would ease him if he could. So, yes, I accept that you are trying to pay a debt, and I forgive the House of Bianchi for what it did to us." The hall was so quiet, they could hear the wind at the windows. Then someone started clapping. It was the old man who had spoken. His thin hands smacked together, sounding like sticks. He was crying openly. One by one, others joined in. Some clapped slowly, unsure, others more firmly. The servants exchanged startled glances, then added their hands. Even Rosa, arms folded, gave a few sharp, approving claps. Vittoria stood rigid, color high in her cheeks. "This is highly irregular," she muttered. Eleanor touched her arm. "It is also right," she said. For a moment Vittoria looked as if she might leave. Instead, she stepped forward. The clapping faded. She stopped in front of Sophia, looking at her as one might look at some unfamiliar but interesting object. "You are your father's daughter," she said at last. "I remember him now. He walked these halls with quiet dignity. We did not treat him as he deserved. For that, I am sorry." The word came out stiff and unused, but it came. Sophia bowed her head. "Thank you, my lady." Vittoria shifted her shawl. "It will not be easy," she said bluntly. "For you, for us. People will gossip. They will drag your father's story out again. They will say the Count has gone soft." "I know," Sophia said. "Do you?" Vittoria asked. "We will see." She turned sharply, as if embarrassed by her own attempt at apology, and returned to her place. Alessandro stepped forward with a low whistle. "Well," he said, half amused, half sincere, "I came for luncheon and found a confession. You do not do things by halves, Lorenzo." "We have done too many things by halves already," Lorenzo answered. Alessandro eyed Sophia. "Signorina," he said, "I envy the man who has your gratitude. It seems he would be rich in more than coin." Elena gave him a look, half warning, half teasing. "Do not start composing speeches now," she said. "You had your chance to impress her with your card tricks last month." There was a ripple of laughter. The tension thinned. The assembly slowly broke apart, people drifting to speak in small groups. Some of the villagers came to Sophia. An older woman who remembered her mother's face, a man who had once turned away from her father at the well, and now could not quite meet her eyes as he mumbled apologies. She received them all, a little dazed, grateful, overwhelmed. When the hall finally cleared, Only the family and staff remained. Lorenzo watched the last tenant go, then turned to the others. "I have one more matter," he said. Vittoria groaned softly. "What now?" she murmured. He walked back to the center. "This is not about ledgers," he said. "This is about the future, mine, my son's." He looked at Sophia. "Yours," he added quietly. Her heart lurched. "In recent months," he said, addressing the room, "I have been accused of many things, of hiding in the nursery, of leaning too heavily on a servant, of neglecting my duties to my rank. Some of those accusations have truth in them. I have been afraid of the world beyond these walls, afraid to feel anything too deeply again." He took a breath. "That ends today." He turned fully toward Sophia. "Sophia Ricci," he said, and the way he said her name sent a shiver through her. "You came here to scrub our floors and carry our water. You ended up carrying our air instead, and along the way more than you should have been asked to bear. You have shown patience when you were insulted, courage when you were dismissed, and tenderness when we did not deserve it. You have been a mother to my son in everything but name, and a light to me when I thought my life had finished." Her eyes stung. "Do not," she began, but her voice failed. He stepped closer. "I do not ask you to forget what this house did to your father," he said. "I do not ask you to pretend the road ahead will be smooth. I ask you only this. Will you join your life to mine? Will you marry me and let us build a different kind of Bianchi house together? One where names are not walls but doors?" The room went so silent, they could hear the logs crackle faintly in the hearth. Vittoria's hand flew to her throat. "You cannot mean—" she began. "I do," Lorenzo said. Eleanor's eyes shone. Alessandro grinned, half delighted, half astonished. Rosa, from the back wall, muttered, "Well, I knew it," and dabbed at her nose with her apron. Sophia stood rooted. She had imagined many endings to her time at the palazzo, being sent away in the night, leaving quietly with her wages. Never this. "Excellency," she whispered, "do you know what you are asking? Truly?" "Yes," he replied. "I am asking you to be my wife, to stand beside me in this house and outside it, to endure stares and whispers, to raise my son as your own, if you will have him, to have more children, perhaps, who will learn both our names with pride. And I am asking you to let me stand with you too, when village tongues remember old lies, when my own family falters, when the weight of rebuilding feels too heavy for your shoulders." Her tears spilled over. "You speak of so much," she said. "Children, pride, doors. What if I fail you? What if I am not—" "Enough," he smiled, and there was warmth and a hint of mischief in it. "Then we will fail together," he said. "And try again tomorrow." A soft sound came from the corridor. They all turned. At the doorway the nurse stood with Matteo on her hip. The child had apparently escaped the nursery's calm. He saw Sophia and wriggled so hard the nurse had to set him down. On unsteady legs he toddled forward, arms outstretched. Ma," he gasped, the word tangled but clear. The room froze. Sophia pressed her hand to her mouth. Lorenzo laughed, a startled, joyful sound. "You see," he said, "even he knows who you already are to him." Matteo collided with Sophia's skirts and clung. She knelt and gathered him, burying her face in his hair for a moment. When she looked up again, something had settled in her gaze. Fear remained, but it lay beside something bigger. Hope. She rose, still holding the child. "Very well," she said, her voice shaking but sure. "Since you ask so plainly, Count Lorenzo Bianchi, yes, I will marry you. I will face the whispers. I will carry your name beside mine. I will love this child as if he were my own blood. And I will love you if you are patient with how long it takes me to believe all this is real." He let out a breath he had not known he was holding. "I have been patient with ledgers and lawyers," he said lightly. "Patience with love will be easier." He stepped forward, and in front of them all, took her free hand and raised it to his lips. The touch was simple, reverent. Vittoria made a small, strangled sound. "This is madness," she said. Elena turned to her. "Perhaps," she agreed, "but if madness looks like a child who no longer cries himself sick, and a count who finally smiles with his whole face, I am inclined to approve." Vittoria glared at her niece, then at Lorenzo, then at Sophia. "If you do this," she said slowly. There will be doors closed to you, houses that will not call, dinners where your wife will be whispered about behind fans. Then we will dine here, Lorenzo said, with people whose fans are too busy cooling their soup to wag their tongues. A few servants snorted, badly hiding their amusement. Vittoria's eyes narrowed. You make jests now. You will not always feel like laughing. I know, he said quietly. Grief taught me that. But I also know this. I would rather face storms with someone I trust at my side than sit in calm rooms with people who smile at me while sharpening their knives under the table. She stared at him a long moment. Finally she sighed. You have always been stubborn, she said, like your father, but perhaps with a different compass. She looked at Sophia. You will never be what I imagined for this house, she said frankly. You will never have the lineage I would have chosen, but you have steadier hands than many ladies I know, and a kinder heart than some who sit in drawing rooms all day. If you are truly determined to bind yourself to this family, I will not stand in the doorway forever. It was not a blessing exactly, but it was not a curse. Sophia inclined her head. Thank you, my lady, she said. Rosa wiped at her nose again. Well, she announced loudly, someone must go tell the kitchen. We cannot celebrate on yesterday's bread. She bustled out, already muttering about sugar and almonds. The hall slowly emptied, people scattering to carry news to plan, to whisper different kinds of stories. Lorenzo, Sophia, and Matteo remained. The child patted Lorenzo's knee with a damp hand, clearly expecting to be included in whatever came next. Lorenzo scooped him up and held him between them. We will be a strange family, Sophia said, half laughing, half crying. A count, a steward's daughter, and a baby who thinks a maid is his kingdom. Every family is strange, Lorenzo answered. Ours will simply be honest about it. He leaned closer. May I? He asked softly. She knew what he meant. Her heart fluttered. Yes, she whispered. His lips met hers, gentle and sure, with the taste of gratitude and promise rather than fire. The kiss was not long, but it was deep, steadying both of them. Matteo squirmed between them, indignant at being momentarily forgotten. He pushed at Lorenzo's chest with a small hand and babbled something that sounded suspiciously like a scold. They broke apart laughing. See, Lorenzo said, we already have a chaperone. The weeks that followed blurred with preparations. The wedding, by mutual agreement, was simple. No grand ball, no endless line of carriages, just the small chapel on the estate, its stone walls holding the prayers of generations. The villagers filled the back pews. The servants sat proudly near the front. The family occupied the middle, stiff at first, then slowly relaxing as the ceremony unfolded. Sophia stood near the door before it began, fingers twisting around a small bouquet of wildflowers Elena had gathered herself. You are pale, Elena observed. I am terrified, Sophia admitted. If I run now, will they catch me? Elena smiled. Probably. There are many of us and only one of you. Besides, your bridegroom is not someone who gives up easily. He is very stubborn, Sophia agreed. That will serve you both, Elena said. She reached up and adjusted a loose strand of hair near Sophia's face. You look more beautiful. Not because of the dress, because of the way you look at the door, as if you know you are walking toward your whole life. Sophia let out a shaky breath. That is what frightens me. Walk anyway, Elena said softly. The music began, a simple hymn played by a village boy on an old organ. Sophia stepped forward, faces blurred as she passed, Rosa dabbing her eyes, the nanny smiling with genuine warmth, Carlo standing straighter than ever, the old farmhand from San Giusto pressing his cap to his chest. At the front, Lorenzo waited. He wore his best coat, but there was still a faint ink stain on one finger. It comforted her more than any jewel could have. His eyes found her and stayed. As she reached him, her knees almost buckled. He saw and extended his arm discreetly. I have you, he murmured. Do not be afraid. I am anyway, she whispered back. Then we will be afraid together, he said. The priest spoke words the walls had heard 1,000 times. Do you take? Yes, I do. Do you promise? Yes, I promise. Sophia's voice trembled on the first words but grew steadier. Lorenzo's voice stayed firm throughout, though his hand tightened around hers at certain phrases. When they turned to face the small assembly, a cheer rose that nearly shook the old glass in the windows. Matteo, in the arms of the nurse, clapped his hands and crowed. Afterward there was food and laughter. Tables were set in the courtyard. The kitchen produced cakes that made the village children's eyes grow wide. Wine flowed. The old man from the fields attempted a dance and nearly fell over, saved only by Rosa's firm grip. Vittoria stood at the edge of it all, watching. At one point, she approached where Sofia sat with Matteo on her lap and Lorenzo at her side. "You have caused quite a scene," she said dryly. "I am sorry, my lady," Sofia replied. "Do not be," Vittoria said. "It has been a long time since this house heard so much honest laughter." She hesitated, then did something no one had seen her do in years. She bent and kissed Matteo's forehead. "Welcome, Countess," she said quietly to Sofia. "Do not disappoint me." Sofia's eyes widened. "I will do my best," she said. "I know," Vittoria replied, and walked away. Even Alessandro, who had flirted half the village maidens during his stay, raised his glass in a sincere toast. "To houses built on truth," he said, smiling, "and to a baby with excellent taste." Evening settled slowly. One by one, people drifted home or to their quarters. The courtyard grew quieter. At last, only a few remained outside. Lorenzo, Sofia, and Matteo, now drowsy and full of cake. They stood near the low wall overlooking the fields. The land stretched away, soft in the fading light. Somewhere beyond, in San Giusto, a new parcel of earth now belonged legally to the Ricci family. "It looks different," Sofia said. "The land?" Lorenzo asked. "No," she said. "The future." He slid an arm around her shoulders. "Does it frighten you still?" he asked. "Yes," she answered honestly. "But the fear is smaller than the joy now." He kissed her temple. "That is all we can ask," he said. "Not to be fearless, only to let love weigh more." She leaned into him, balancing Matteo on her hip. The child yawned widely, then laid his head on her shoulder, utterly trusting. "Do you remember," she asked softly, "how he cried before?" "Yes," Lorenzo said. "I hear it sometimes still, at night. In my head." "I do too," she admitted. "But then I hear his laugh over it. It is louder." He smiled against her hair. "That is what this house will be now," he said. "Not a place without sorrow, but a place where joy is at last allowed to speak louder." Behind them, the windows of the palazzo glowed with warm light. Inside, Rosa scolded a kitchen girl gently. Carlo closed a ledger with a satisfied thump. Vittoria sat in her chair and, when no one watched, allowed herself a small, relieved smile. Elena wrote a letter to a friend, describing the most unexpected wedding she had ever attended. And in the nursery, the cradle stood ready. Sofia carried Matteo there a little later, with Lorenzo at her side. They laid the boy down together, each adjusting the blanket, each smoothing his hair. He blinked sleepily up at them. "Sleep, little Count," Sofia whispered. "Your house is different now. You may rest in it." He kicked once, then settled. Lorenzo reached for her hand. "Do you regret anything?" he asked quietly. She thought of her father, of injustice, of anger, of the day she had arrived with a small bundle and a heart full of dread, of the first time Matteo had smiled in her arms. "No," she said, "I regret only that he did not live to see this. But perhaps he knows. Somewhere." Lorenzo nodded. "Then let us live in a way that would make him proud," he said, "and make our son proud when he is old enough to remember more than arms and lullabies." She squeezed his hand. "We will," she said. They turned out the lamp. In the darkness, the baby's breathing was soft and steady. In the corridor outside, the air felt light, as if some old weight had finally been lifted from the stones. The Count, who had once walked these halls with grief alone, now walked beside a woman from the fields, their hands brushing. Between them, though old stories and old pain still echoed faintly, a new story had begun. A story in which a baby who had once cried in every noble embrace smiled easily every day. Not because the world was perfect, but because the arms that held him were full of truth, of forgiveness, and of love. Thank you so much for listening to this story, all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.